progress.
Today we're going to be learning Sukkah Daf Yud Zayin. This is the Daf for Shabbat. What we're mainly going to talk about today is the difference between schach pasul, disqualified schach, that we've been discussing all along, and an empty space in your sukkah, which is just, missing space. And there's going to be a big difference between them in terms of, we talked about this already, that generally we say, although we'll see there's a debate about this, that space, airspace, empty airspace of 3 tvachim, 3 handbreadths is already a problem because of levud, right? It's basically judged as an empty space unless it's less than 3 tvachim. Then we kind of see it as one continuum. But if there's a big break, then already there's no connection between, let's say, your wall and the schach because there's this break, and that's a problem. That's going to be the first case of our Mishnah. When we come to schach pasul, you actually have something, but it's disqualified schach. That we say is a 4 tvachim, 4 handbreadths, although we're going to see today that there's a bit of a debate about what the size is for that. So starting with the Mishnah at the top, if you distance the schach, we're going to use pictures today, there's a lot of them, and I'll use share screen. So if you're watching the video, it will be helpful. If not, please look along with the pictures. Picture 96. Here's your wall. You have 3-walled sukkah. Then your schach on one of the walls is away by 3 tvachim from the wall. So your schach only starts further on. That's going to be disqualified because you have this big space and then your schach is no longer connected with your wall. Bayit shenifchat v'sikecha gabav. You have a house, next picture, picture number 97. You have a house with, we had this case before, with a big hole in your roof. All of a sudden there's a big hole in the middle of your roof. And you put schach on that hole. So maybe this works as a sukkah, right? You're kind of under the sun. You put up schach for sukkot. Well, im yesh min hakota lasikuch arba amot psula. This is your classic law of dofen akuma that we've been learning all along, which is one of these traditions that was passed down, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. As long as there's less than 4 cubits between the schach and the walls, each of the walls, then we're going to assume that the schach, and as your ceiling, which is clearly not schach, is disqualified. But since you have schach in the middle and it's less than 4 amot away from the sides, wherever there's non-kosher schach, it's viewed as if it's the wall slanted in and it's just still wall, meaning you can't sit under that part. You can't be yotzei or chiyuv. You can't fulfill your obligation, but you can sit under the schach that's in the middle. So im yesh min hakota arba amot, but if there's already 4 cubits like there is in this picture, then it's disqualified. V'chein chatzel shehi mukefet achsadra. If you have, here's a good picture, you have your house, assuming your house is shaped in a U shape, and then you have an achsadra, so in between where your house is, that, you have 3 sides like a U, so in that empty space of the U, you have a portico, which is basically like a pergola, a porch coming out of your roof, but without walls. It's just on the top. So coming off of your house in the same U-shaped formation. So now what do you want to do? You want to put your schach on the empty part in between the empty part of the U from the portico, right? Because your portico already has a cover, so you're not going to cover your portico with schach. You want to put it on the empty space. What's the problem? It's not attached to the walls of the house. So therefore, if you have a courtyard, which is mukefet achsadra, which is then connected to the house, sukkah gdola, right? So it's the same thing. It's no good. Sukkah gdola shikifua. So that's going to be another case where we say, right, if it's going to have to depend on whether you're 4 amot away from the wall. If you're 4 cubits away from the walls of your house, then it's a problem. If you're less, then again, we view the portico as dofen akuma, as the wall slanted in, and you can actually use the part that's under the schach as a good sukkah. Next case, sukkah gdola shikifua b'davar she'em mesachachim bo. You have a sukkah, but most of your sukkah you covered with non-kosher schach, and then you put this little part in the middle that has kosher schach. This is just kind of like your house with a little part of schach in the middle. Im yesh shachtav arba amot psula. Again, if there's 4 cubits to the sides, from all the sides, right, then you're going to have a problem. If they're less than 4 cubits away from the walls, they have to all be less than 4 cubits away from the wall, then, right, where you have the kosher schach, then it will be okay. This seems very repetitive, and all the cases are very similar, to which the Gemara is going to ask exactly that question. Kol hanei amali, why do you need all these cases? Tzricha, you need them. Why? If you had the case of the house, you might have thought Mishum dehani mechitza labayit avidan. Therefore, maybe we'll allow it as long as it's less than 4 cubits, because they were good solid walls. They were meant to be lived in. Aval chatzir hamukefet achsadra demechitzo lav lachsadra avida emalo. But you might have thought the courtyard walls, where you're using the walls of your house. Now, the walls of your house were meant to be used for the inside of your house, not for the outside. So maybe we won't count those walls. If they're within 4 cubits of your schach, we maybe don't count them because they're walls of your house, right? I don't know how many of you do this, but many people use the wall of their house as your sukkah. This is coming to teach you that not only can you use the walls of your house as a sukkah, but even if it's distanced from your sukkah, we still allow it, even though you might have thought not. And that's why we tell you that case. And if we had just those 2 cases, it still wouldn't have been enough. You might have thought, because when you put on the schach, though, the schach that you put on was good schach. Aval sukkah gdola, shekifur b'davar she'em mesachachim bo, dischacha schach pasulhu, emalo. In other words, here, you actually put up bad schach. The other ones, just you use what was already there. Right, you had the roof of your house, you had the portico, but it wasn't that you put up schach that was disqualified. Here, you put all around it schach that's disqualified. Maybe that would be worse. Therefore, they come to teach you, no, sricha. Therefore, they told you that case to teach you, even if you had schach pasul, as long as it's less than 4 cubits away from the kosher schach, then you're okay. Until you get to the kosher schach. Amar Rabba. Now we're going to have a big debate between Rabba and the house of Rav. Soon we're going to have a different version, and what Rabba says in this case, we're going to attribute to Rav, actually. But here Rabba disagrees with what they said from the house of Rav. Amar Rabba, ashkechtinu lerabanan dibei Rav. I found the rabbis from the house of Rav, diyatve v'ka'amri, that they were saying the following. This goes back to what I said at the beginning of class today. Avir pasul b'shlosha, schach pasul posel avir posel b'shlosha. Airspace disqualifies already at 3 tvachim, 3 handbreadths. Schach pasul posel ba'arba, and non-kosher schach disqualifies at 4 tvachim, 4 handbreadths. V'amina lu'ana, but I said to them, no. Avira de posel b'shlosha menalachu. Where do you get it from? Ditnan. Where else? From our Mishnah. Hirchiket hasikuch min atfalot shlosha tvachim psula. Right? If you distance it from the wall, 3 tvachim, it's disqualified. Schach pasul, if you're going to learn it all from our Mishnah, let's continue on in our Mishnah. Now we understand our Mishnah a little bit differently. We keep saying that all these laws of 4 cubits is about dofen akuma. But he doesn't understand it that way. He says, Schach pasul nami loli pasel ela ba'arba amot. If you're learning the empty schach, well, let's learn the disqualified schach. Our Mishnah seems to indicate disqualified schach is a problem if it's 4 cubits. Now, only if you read it as dofen akuma, then you don't really get to that conclusion. But he seems to say as long as it's 4 cubits away, as long as the schach pasul is less than 4 cubits, it's fine. Seems to say that disqualified schach is only a problem at actually 4 cubits. Ditnan, as it says, so just like with the airspace, it said, if between the schach and the wall is 3 tvachim, and that taught you about airspace is a problem of 3. Likewise, when it says, if your schach is within 4 cubits, if it's more than 4 cubits away from the wall, it's disqualified. That shows that schach pasul, disqualified schach, like your roof of your house, which can't be used as schach, would disqualify only at 4 cubits and not at 4 handbreadths. Again, remember the distinction. 4 handbreadths is a sixth of 4 cubits. So a huge difference in halacha here. You could see why there might be confusion. 4, right? As I told you, grammatically, it's a different word. It's arba'at tvachim and arba amot. But still, you could see why you might get confused. And also, because of the sources that give significance to 4 cubits, also, in addition to the 4 tvachim, the 4 handbreadths. So Rabbah comes and says, you should learn from our Mishnah 4 cubits and not 4 handbreadths. V'amrulei, so then they responded to Rava. In other words, Rabbah is saying, when I told this to the rabbis of the house of Rav, they said to me, Bar minei dahahu de Rav Shmuel amrei travayu mishum dofen akuman aguba. You misunderstood the Mishnah. I go by Rav and Shmuel. We go by Rav and Shmuel, who said, right? It's the house of Rav who says we go by Rav and Shmuel, who said the whole issue in this Mishnah with the 4 cubits all has to do with the rule of dofen akuma, has nothing to do with disqualified schach is at 4 cubits. V'amina lehu ana. We're going to have a back and forth with them. Rabbah said to them then, Ma ilu ika schach pasul pacho me'arba'a. Va'avir pachot mishlosha mai. What if I had, okay, let's pull up a picture here. What if I had, here, let's see. Okay, here are the pictures of avir at 3 and schach pasul at 4, right? Okay, now, what if I had next to each other airspace that was less than 3, which is not disqualified, and non-kosher schach at less than 4, which is not disqualified. So comes Rav and he says to the people from Rav's house, he says, Rav's yeshiva, says, according to you, what would happen if I had these two right next to each other, as you see in picture 102? My kshera, it would be okay, because you don't have enough of airspace and you don't have enough disqualified schach. But if you take that same case, if we're saying that at 4 tfachim, 4 handbreadths already, it's a problem. So now, what if malye b'shipudin, I added something else, not the same material, you can see from the picture here. I added metal skewers to basically make the 4 cubits space, the 4 handbreadth space wider and get to 4 handbreadths. You would say psula. So basically we're saying, if it's empty space, it's okay. But if you add in that empty space of less than 3, and you add these metal skewers that are susceptible to impurity and therefore not good schach, it'll obviously join together with the other and make it wider, right? And then you'll have a disqualified sukkah because you'll have more than 4 handbreadths of disqualified schach. Now he says like this, that's going to create a problem according to what you said, because lo yehei avira posel b'shlosha kischach pasula posel ba'arba'a. You're going to say, isn't avir worse because it's already a problem at 3 tvachim? So how can you say if the 3 tvachim if the air space is worse, how can in this case it actually be better to have airspace and it won't disqualify your sukkah? V'amruli, and they responded to me by saying the following: Ihachi l'didach nami. What your question is a question also according to you, because it doesn't really matter 4 tvachim, 4 handbreadths, or 4 cubits for this matter. If, according to you, you would have the same problem. So they throw the question back at him and say, look, if you had less than 4 cubits, look at picture number 104, less than 4 cubits of non-kosher schach, and then you had less than 3 handbreadths of airspace. So, right, l'didach nami ta'amar. The same thing would be said for you. Schach pasul posel ba'arba amot. You think schach pasul disqualifies at 4 cubits. So again, what will we have? If you had uma ilu ika schach pasul pachot me'arba amot, you had less than 4 cubits of schach, disqualified schach, and avir pachot mishlosha mai, you would say also here it would be kshera. And malye b'shipudim, if you took that same thing, that empty airspace, and you filled it with non-kosher schach, what would you say? Well, now you got to 4 cubits of non-kosher schach, and you would disqualify it. You would say psula. So the same question is asked to you. Lo yehei avir posel b'shlosha kischach pasula posel ba'arba amot. Of course, even the truth is the question is more strong according to you, because you're so much more strict with the airspace, and yet in this case it's going to be worse if you have non-kosher schach in that empty space than if you have empty space in that empty space. So, therefore, they throw the question right back at Rabbah. Okay? Now, what's his response? V'amina lehu ana, I said to them, wait a minute. Hi mai, how do you get to this? That's not really a claim. Bishlama lididi, according to me, I have a good answer to this. Da'amina arba amot mishum shi'ura. Arba amot is because it was learned halacha l'moshe misinai. Now this is interesting. They say basically, Rabbah is saying, this whole thing of 4 cubits, where do we get it from? Even though he doesn't agree with the Dofen Akuma issue, that 4 cubits is Dofen Akuma, he does agree that it's learned from a tradition of halacha l'moshe misinai. If that's the case, that's learned, right, mishum shi'ura, v'lav shi'urahu. In other words, what does he say? Arba amot is because of a shiur, because it was a tradition. V'lav shi'urahu, but it's not, right, it's any less than that, it's not a problem. But hi, lav shi'urahu. Okay, but this, it doesn't have, okay, one second, arba amot is shi'ur lifsol, and any less than that is not a problem, right? It's not because of Dofen Akuma, it's because of, it's one of these, if you remember, we learned all the shiurim were past halacha l'moshe misinai. So now he says, if you look at Rashi, by the way, it's a little tricky, the wording here. He says, Hai lav shiurahu kevan de lo shavu garsina velo garsina v'kevan. Okay, he has a little bit of a different girsa here, although let's just read it. He says, Hai lav shiura, but even though you'll get to 4 cubits, you don't have the requisite amount of non-kosher schach. Therefore, kevan de lo shavu shiure lahadade, since each of these amounts has a different requisite amount, lo mitzdarfe, they don't combine. It's when you have 4 cubits is one amount, and you have 3 handbreadths of a different thing, those two don't combine at all. But ela lididchu, but your reason doesn't have to do with requisite amount. What's your reason? Your reason is because arba'at tvachim, I have a tradition that says when it comes to schach, pasul, disqualified schach, it's 4 cubits. That's a tradition. And then we have the 3 tvachim, which is lavud, which is the tradition for the other. Those are traditions. Those don't mix. But why do you think 4 tvachim is an issue? You say, what's 4 tvachim? We learned it from Mavoy and all sorts of other Shabbat. We learned it 4 cubits is a significant amount. If you have 4 cubits of pasul schach, what does that basically do? It designates this space as kind of open space, problematic space, and it splits the sukkah in half, so to speak. It basically disconnects the walls of the sukkah because you have this whole strip in the middle that separates your sukkah into 2. That's what we're going to see right now. What we're going to say is, according to you, Marita shiur mishum haflaga, your reason for this amount of 4 tvachim is because you're basically splitting the sukkah in half. Mali yitpelig b'schach pasul, mali yitpelig b'schach pasul. Mali yitpelig b'schach pasul ve'avir. What's the difference if I split it? If your whole issue is you're splitting the sukkah in half because you don't have kosher space here, which basically splits your sukkah in half, and you no longer have 3 walls that are next to each other because those are connected with 2 walls, and that side's connected with 2 walls, and you basically split the whole thing. If that's the case, then what's the difference if we split it by non-kosher schach or we split it by airspace? It's all basically a problem of splitting the sukkah. So while it's true that one is 3 handbreadths and one is 4 handbreadths, it's still really all from the same source. Whereas according to me, it's 2 different traditions entirely, one about levud and one about the 4 cubits of pasul schach. Therefore, my 2 can't combine, but your 2 come from the same reason. So theoretically, they should combine. And that's his question, because we know they don't combine. So that's his question against them. Amalei Abaye, I'm now going to pull up a picture. Abaye now says to Rabbi, I have a problem with what you're saying. Ulemar nami, according to what you just asked against Rav, I'm going to ask a question against you. Ulemar nami, according to you also, Nihid lo shavu shiurayu besukah gdola, besukah ktana mi lo shavu shiurayu. If you have a very small sukkah, here's a picture 106 of a small sukkah, 7 by 7. Now, if you have sukkah, you have non-kosher schach in this sukkah, already at 3 tvachim, we're going to disqualify it because you have to have at least 4 tvachim of kosher schach. That means even according to you, so normally schach pasul is at 4 cubits, but in a very small sukkah, a halachic small sukkah, already at 3 tvachim you're going to have a problem, which means that there is some place where the 3 tvachim of airspace and the 3 tvachim of disqualified schach are going to actually meet and be the same. Which means that theoretically, since there's a match of those in some place, that means that we should actually be able to combine them. And we're back to asking the same question on you that you asked on Rav. So now, Amar Le, he says, no. Hatam lav mishum deshavu shiurayu lahadadehu. That's not because they have the same requisite amount. That's because of a different reason. It's because you're not going to actually have a minimum size of a sukkah here. You need to have space of a sukkah here. Right? It has to be less than 3 tvachim, otherwise you're not going to have a law of lavud, and you won't have schach to cover 7 by 7, right? With less than 3, we'll use lavud to basically say, even though your schach is only 4 tvachim in a bit, it at least an imaginary way, right, with the laws of lavud could cover your whole thing. But once it's more than 3, it's going to be a problem, and therefore it has nothing to do with the requisite amount, which would then lead us to our question. It has to do with you just don't have the minimum amount needed for the sukkah. Okay, now that's that. Now we're going to ask another question. Now they're going to say, wait a minute. This was all based on this principle that since they have different requisite amounts, Rabba's question was, since they have different requisite amounts, therefore you can't combine them. So this whole concept, they're going to question. If they have different requisite amounts, they don't join together. V'hatnan, doesn't it say in the Mishnah? This is a Mishnah about things that are susceptible to impurity, different materials. It's a Mishnah Masechet Kelim. Habeged, shlosha al shlosha. If you have a piece of cloth, there's different opinions exactly. I'm not going to get into the details. Is this talking specifically about Tumat Midras, which is something that a Zav steps on? Or is it talking about in general impurity to a dead person? Okay, we're not going to get into all the details here of that, but let's just go through. There's different requisite amounts for different size clothing. If you remember, we just had about blai, right? Shreds of clothes and 3x3 fingers. It's already something a poor person can use. Here we're going to actually have the larger amount, which matches what the rich people use. Okay, which is a beged shlosha shlosha. Remember, shlosha means tfachim, handbreadths. So a cloth, which is the size of 3x3, is impure. Hasak, if you have the material of a sack, which is different material, arba'a al arba'a. Okay, that's already 4 tfachim. Okay, this is made from goat hairs. So that's already 4 by 4 tfachim. Ha'ol, if it's made from leather, chamisha chamisha, and mapatz, which is a machzeled, a mat of reeds, shishal shisha. So you have different amounts because different pieces of cloth or materials were used for different items and used at different sizes. So each one has its own requisite amount. Now, so they clearly each have their own, and we want to show that they actually can combine. Vitane Allah, there's a braita that says, habeged v'hasak. Okay, we can go one level up. The beged and the sak normally has to be bigger. Hasak v'ha'ol, ha'ol v'amapatz, mitzdarfim zeim zeh. They could combine together to get to the requisite amount needed. So you can combine things that are different amounts. So why was Rabbah claiming that it can't be, according to you, that one is 3 and one is 4 and they don't combine? And his whole thing was, you have a problem, I don't, because your requisite amounts, right, don't combine with each other. That if they have different amounts, well, he said Rabbah was trying to support his own, saying these are different shiurim entirely. Right? You're there for the same logic, they theoretically should combine. And they don't, and that's a problem for you. I think the requisite amounts won't combine if they have different requisite amounts. So here it seems like they do combine. So what do they answer? Ha-tam kedekatane tama. No, there it's because it says it's the reason. Amar Rabbi Shimon matam ho'il v'ra'oi l'tamei moshav keditna'a. Even though they have different requisite amounts, they actually do have something that they're all the same for. And this is for Tumat Moshav. This is a special Tumah that applies only to a Zav, certain types of Tumah, Yoledet, Nida, that if they sit on something, that item becomes Tameh. Okay? So, when it comes to sitting, they all have the same amount. As it says, Keditnan, as it says in the Mishnah, HaMekatzea mikulan tefach al tefach. If you cut a piece that's 1 by 1 tefach, 1 handbreadth only, tameh. Okay? Now, any of these has the same amount when it comes to Tumat Moshav, sitting on it. Why is that? Tefach al tefach lamai chaze. What is it relevant for? Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Interesting. We just had him the other day saying, what is something else? What is it worthy of? With the I forget now it was. Second, let me quickly look back. Shim ben Lakish, I think it was on Gedalit or Tevav. So, it wasn't that. I thought it was that, but it's not. Okay, I forget. But he said he gave a requisite amount for something else. Maybe it was Gimel. Where did he come in? Okay, sorry. Yeah. It's, right, the eter. That since you could use the yadot with the pitchfork, therefore, they're usable. He gave a reason for that. Here also, he says, what are they usable for? So now let's read. Now there's a different girsa here. Litlai al gabe chamor. You can put it as a patch on your saddle for your donkey. So therefore, 1 by 1 tefach of any of these is actually usable for sitting on if you use it as a patch. Okay, that's all the first version. So we basically had this discussion between Rabbah and the students of Rav. Students of Rav said, Schach Pasul is a problem of 4 tefachim, 4 handbreadths, and Rabbah said it's a 4 amot. And then there was a whole back and forth between them. Besura, Amar lahashmata b'hai lishna. That was all the way they learned it in the yeshiva in Sura. These are 2 different cities in Bavel. B'Nehardea, but in Nehardea, the other city, Manu, they learned it the following way. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Schach pasul be'emtza, posel ba'arba'a. Minatzad, posel ba'arba amot. Shmuel said, disqualified schach, this is what we've been learning until now. In the middle of your sukkah is a problem of 4 tvachim. On the side of your sukkah, it has to cover a space of 4 cubits. V'Rav Amar, bein minatzad, bein ba'emtza ba'arba amot. This is exactly what Rabbah said against the students of Rav. Here it's said by the name of Rav. That it doesn't matter where the schach pasul is, it has to cover 4 cubits of space, otherwise it's not a problem. Okay, I think there's a picture of this. Let's just pull it up. Right, Rav Amar, this is Rav. 4 cubits anywhere is only if it gets to 4 cubits will it be a problem. If it's less than 4 cubits, even in the middle of your sukkah, it's not a problem. Tanan. So now they ask a question. Natan, this is going to raise an issue. Okay, what's it going to raise an issue with? This is going to raise an issue with Shmuel. Natan aleha neser shur rachav arba'at tvachim kshera. If you put a beam that's 4 tvachim wide, right? What do we say? It's okay. Your sukkah isn't disqualified. Now, why? If sukkah is posel at 4 handbreadths, it should be a problem, right? Schach pasul. So bishlam al Rav damar bein ba'emtza bein menatza ba'arba amot mishum hachi kshera. That's why this is okay. Ela l'Shmuel, but according to Shmuel da'amar ba'arba'a amai kshera. Why would it be okay, your sukkah? So now we're going to explain it the way we explained it until now, which is hacha b'mayaskina minatzad. The reason why this 4 tvachim is not disqualified is because it's on the side, and then we have dofen akuma comes into play, right? Where first we read this as if dofen akuma is not the issue, but right we have to break away from the way we understood these sources until now because they're rereading them to question Rav, because Rav basically doesn't hold by this dofen akuma. He thinks no matter what 4 cubits, not that he disagrees with it, he just thinks not only on the side, but anywhere 4 cubits is okay, right? Up until 4 cubits, it's okay. At 4 cubits, it will be a problem. So we basically say, in order to fix Shmuel, that must be minatzad. That's how we've understood it until now, dofen akuma. Another question against Shmuel, tashma. This is just a review of sources we've seen until now. Shnei stinim mitzdarfim, right? You have 2 sheets. You can combine them to the 4 tvachim amount, right, to disqualify. Rabbi Meir, shnei nisarim ein mitzdarfim, but 2 beams are not going to be mitzdaref to passel a beam that's going to be, right, as your beam is going to be 4. Rabbi Meir omer nisarim kastinim. Rabbi Meir says, no, beams are the same way and they can combine together. So bishlam alahach lishne da'amar Rav bein ba'emtza bein menatza ba'arba amot. And my mitzdarfim la'arba amot. So Rav makes perfect sense. Right, we're going to say, let me just switch we're done with the pictures. Okay, no more pictures. So now, according to Rav, this is going to make perfect sense. Why? It doesn't matter if it's in the middle, on the side. The whole idea is that these beams, because remember we said, likely these were already 4 tvachim beams. If that's the case, if they're already 4 handbreadths, what are they combining to? They're combining to get to the requisite amount of 4 cubits, because only at 4 cubits is it going to be a problem, according to Rav. Only in the middle 4, that's the first lashon, or really Shmuel, hechidami. What would be the case? If they're 4 cubits, if they're already 4 handbreadths, then what do they need to combine to get to? This is the exact question we had on it originally. Because it's already a problem at 4. And if it doesn't have 4, then there should be no problem. They shouldn't join with each other. That's just basically wood pieces, which are allowed, narrow pieces. So they answer exactly as we answered before. La'olam de'ipu arba'a. Really, they start, these boards are already 4. Umay mitzdarfin la'arba amot minatzad. When we mean mitzdarfin, and this was something we struggled to understand then, it means they can combine with other boards. Actually, there is a picture of this. They can combine with other boards, this is the last picture, to get to the space where we're already beyond 4 cubits. Now, to get to our 4 cubit amount, if we put beam that's 4, 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 6 of them, then we're already at 4 amot. It doesn't have to be one big beam. It can even be a bunch of different beams together that each of them are problematic in and of themselves. However, if they're less than 4 cubits, it's not a problem. Once they get to 4 cubits, it's a problem. At that point, we'll disqualify our sukkah. So with that, we will finish for today. We'll have more questions that are raised on these opinions tomorrow. So just to review, we had a debate between Rabba and Rav. The first reading, that was Surah's reading of the sugya, which is that Rav said 3 tfachim for airspace. Everyone agrees about that. And 4 tfachim for non-kosher schach. If it's in the middle of your sukkah, as long as it's on the side, it's dofen akuma, you have up to 4 cubits. Versus Rabbah, who said, no, anywhere in your sukkah, 4 cubits will be a problem, but less than that will not be a problem at all for schach pasul, for disqualified schach. We saw a conversation between them. Then we brought the second lashon, which actually had Rav saying what Rabbah said and Shmuel saying what Rav had said in the previous sugya. And then we brought different sources that seemed to raise a question on Shmuel or Rav's reading according to the first reading. With that, we will finish, and Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov.